In the continuation of today's manhwa, we see how Jang Fu, with a red face and furious with the actions of the main character, pointed his fist at him and is about to deliver his strong blow. Next, we see how this evil guy begins to strike one blow after another, trying to finish off the main character, Shu Xiao, but we know that this guy cannot be stopped so easily, so the red-haired man is in for a surprise. Shu Xiao hit him directly on the forehead, from which he was slightly surprised, apparently not expecting to receive a rebuff. After the blow, the main character walked around him from behind and grabbed him with both his hands, intending to use the technique. It can be seen that he really is behind Liu Zhen and has already managed to take him in a death grip. About to use his technique, the red-haired one only screams because he can't do anything anyway. The crowd watches as Shu Xiao grabbed his enemy, after which he jumped high up with him and began to spin with him in the air, about to powerfully throw him to the ground. People think that Shu Xiao wants to die with him. After several seconds of scrolling high above the ground, the main character, confident of his success, turned upside down along with the red-haired one and was about to hit him on the ground, but he only demanded to let him go. We can see that the blow was delivered and Liu Zhen's head met the hard ground. Thick smoke rose all around, in which it was difficult to see anything. It would seem that this blow was fatal for the two opponents. The smoke slowly begins to settle, and from this thick smoke a dark figure emerges, who just stands and looks at the crowd. People look at him and wonder who it really is. It turned out that this is our main character, who now looks tired. He thinks Liu Zhen is amazing, asking him about fist technique. He also remembers how his opponent taught him not to be careless. It turned out that our strongman was sitting right on the back of Liu Zhen, who was pressed by the blue-haired one to the ground. Xiao sat down on this weakling to rest, and the red-haired one screamed and demanded that he get off him. The main character still continues to sit on the defeated, helpless opponent and look straight at the crowd of spectators. All the people begin to applaud the winner and are very happy for him. Next, the tournament judge, noticing that the fight has come to an end, sees that the main character continues to sit directly on the Liu Zhen. He decides to approach them with a serious face to say something. Approaching the blue-haired man, the judge notices that the guy really looks a little tired, and looking straight into his eyes asks if he needs a break after such a long and surprisingly difficult fight. The guy listened to him and was very glad that the tournament judge noticed his fatigue and invited him to rest, so of course he agrees, because he cannot ignore such a wonderful offer. The man with the bun on his head, of course, also could not ignore Liu Zhen, who is right now lying under the blue-haired man. He says that he will also need a break, because he has experienced a lot. The beaten Liu Zhen is taken by two rescuers onto a gurney, and they are about to take him away in some direction. The main character just stands and looks at how the red-haired man lies on this gurney in the pose of an asterisk. A prankster in a cool robe approaches the blue-haired dude. While he continues to look after the people who are right now taking Liu Zhen away from this place, he decides to check if the winner has yet recovered. Shu Xiao turns to him and does not understand the question, thinking that the judge is joking because he just finished the fight. Meanwhile, he received passivity points for inspiration. The total number of points is now 7255. The guy takes the bottle in his hands and realizes that the dark sorrow exploded, and he was seriously injured. But there is one more breakthrough competition left. He is going to use the healing pill that Elder Chow gave him. Taking out one grade 10 healing pill from the bottle, that is a dark golden pill, the blue-haired man brought it to his nose and began to strongly inhale its smell. Apparently this way it will help him. After taking a powerful breath, watching Shu Xiao's behavior, it may seem that he inhaled not the aroma of this healing pill but something else. His legs tightened, and a strong trembling ran through his whole body. The audience watches this and does not understand what he is doing, but one of them realized that he is using a healing elixir that should cure him, while someone else thinks that the pill is poisonous and the guy will come to an end. However, Shu Xiao felt incredible pleasure after inhaling this substance. He fell to the ground with a smile, and his body continued to shake violently. It felt as if he would now stop showing signs of life. People watching the main character fell into severe shock. They can no longer understand what this fool ate. Because he shuddered greatly, they look at him and notice that he is completely shaking, and apparently this is bad. The blue-haired man begins to make some strange sounds and tell everyone that there are no problems. The judge looks at the blue-haired man and thinks that there are still problems, because this fool continues to lie on the ground and shake. The judge, having decided that the guy cannot cope with this on his own, runs up to him as if about to give him a massage. He says that if the guy cannot cope with this, then he will take him to heal his wounds.
Shu Xiao continues to lie on the ground, and from all this pleasure his face is already red, and he asks the judge not to touch him, because at the moment he is too sensitive and makes strange sounds.
The trial judge, seeing his crazy face and hearing the strange sounds he makes, lets go of his hands and stands on the ground, thinking that it might be better to leave this addict alone. The angry crowd has already realized that the guy also took an aphrodisiac and ate it right at the competition. They ask someone to calm him down and want the judges to conduct a doping test, believing that Shu Xiao took a prohibited drug. From the emotions of the crowd, the blue-haired man continues to accumulate passivity points for ridicule and suspicion. A black-haired man approached him and, examining the guy, asked the judge if everything was okay with him. After examining his body, the black-haired man still didn't understand what kind of medicinal pill he took, but the effect it had was simply terrible, but his body would soon recover and he would feel much better. The judge simply felt funny at the man's words. Then he looked straight at him angrily and asked how the guy could get better, if right now he was just lying on the ground and shaking like crazy. But the mustachioed man casts an embarrassed glance directly at the main character and says that he simply decided to relax after a hard battle because he was very tired, no matter how strange it may sound to others. The judge is simply shocked by the words of this man. At first he cannot find words and simply turns away from the black-haired man. But then he says that even ghosts do not relax like that and finds it very strange. At the beginning of the next chapter, we see how the main character has already gotten back to his feet, having recovered from that pill, and the crowd from the stands is watching with interest what is happening. They really want to see what will happen next. It seems to Blue-haired that he has already recovered, but he still does not feel very well and feels some kind of pain, while his body continues to shake slightly, and the system says that the guy has collected 20 passivity points. The judge approaches the tired guy and asks if he is ready for the last round of this test. Shu Xiao turns to him and is about to give his answer, but it seems the answer is already clear. Tired Shu Xiao, turning to the judge with a pitiful face, asks to give him enough time to restore his breathing. Judging by the expression on the judge's face, he did not expect to hear this now. But the judge of this test didn't care about this guy's answer. Apparently, he expected to see that the guy was ready to fight. Despite the fact that this was not the case, he says that they don't have time and announces to everyone that it's starting. Blue-haired paid attention to the judge's announcement. He considers him just a bastard because he ignored it. The main character is tired. Shu Xiao believes that this man is trying to press on him. We again see the table that is already familiar to us, on which there is the name of the main character, namely Shu Xiao, but we do not see the name of the opponent yet, and the judge is already about to announce the name of the new opponent. It turned out that his new opponent will be Wen Chun. The main character is slightly tense because of his opponent, and believes that the judge just wants to finish him off and is giving him to be torn to pieces by that person. The audience is so shocked by his opponent. They understand that Shu Xiao has already suffered enough, and now this is happening. He just returned from a life-or-death battle, but he was not even allowed to rest and is already being thrown into a battle with the elder that guards the ring. One of the spectators decides to clarify with the other who this elder is, who is guarding the ring, and asks to quickly tell what is going on. Meanwhile, the people around are in shock, also waiting for an answer. He says that Boss Wen was unlucky on stage number 2. He ended in a draw with Chao Qing-teng and lost in one match. Becoming the champion in second place, the man with long hair believes that Shu Xiao is also a champion. But Chao Qing-teng is second in the ranking of Master with innateness. Boss Wen is 7th in the ranking, and half a step away from innateness. The second guy has already begun to realize how strong the opponent of our main character is, and got a little worried. Next, the all-knowing guy from the stands decides to stir up the interest of the others. He says that Shu Xiao is a natural enemy for Wen Chong. The crowd does not like these intrigues, and they forgive him to tell him everything. The smart guy decides to tell them everything, and says that they know that Liu Zhen is a genius at the 10th stage, that he almost knocked down Shu Xiao himself. People are becoming more and more interested in listening to this, and they say that they know about it. Next, the guy decides to say something that will completely blow the minds of all the people sitting in the stands. He tells them that Wen Chong is his younger brother, and is already waiting for the audience's reaction to his words. The whole crowd listened to him carefully, and they simply cannot believe his words. They all open their mouths and continue to admire it. They are already wondering what will happen in the ring in the battle of these strong men. But that's not all. He decides to remind everyone about Di Xin Air. Shu Xiao ran a wooden sword across this girl's face twice. The audience, of course, remembered this moment, and also how they didn't like it. The guy from the stands is about to say something that should also surprise all the spectators here, but he was interrupted by the judge of this test himself, and says that Wen Chong is in love with this girl. The crowd was very surprised by this turn of events. One might say they had a brain explosion. They now believe that Shu Xiao is really in trouble, and his opponent will definitely kick his ass for this. Next, we are finally shown the events that are taking place on the stage. We can see how Wen Chong, who is in 7th place in the ranking of the Driven Clouds, comes out onto it. In the outer courtyard, by the way, he is called Boss Wen. The main character and the yellow-haired one come face to face. The blue-haired one greets his rivals, calling him his younger brother, and at the same time holds some strange fragment in his hands. The brave Shu Xiao throws this very fragment at his strong opponent, and at the same time smiles slyly, being confident of his victory. His opponent is greatly surprised by the impudence of this blue-haired man. The audience is also shocked by Shu Xiao's courage. Their legs would give way if they started talking to Boss Wen like that. Someone from the crowd, seeing that the main character is still standing on his feet, understands that he is really very strong. Wen Chong, addressing the main character, says that he is not bad, and that those who touch his people should be psychologically prepared. Apparently, he remembered what Shu Xiao did with Di Shinner and is going to beat him for it. These two continue to stand in front of each other and look into each other's eyes, trying to appear brave. The judge standing next to them is already announcing the start of the competition, and the two are now facing a fierce battle. Wen Chong has a spiritual cloning technique. The longer it accumulates, the more clones he can summon at a time, and since Shu Xiao is going to keep his distance as usual, he can stall for time. The audience already considers the main character an idiot. They think that he doesn't know about Boss Wen's technique. They think that the guy is finished because he only knows one white cloud fencing style. But then they saw how the blue-haired guy took out a wooden sword. The previously defeated Liu Zhen is watching this whole performance from the side. He saw how Shu Xiao closed his eyes and it seemed too familiar to him. He already assumes what the guy will do. He realizes that the blue-haired one is going to show the mastery of the sword that he showed at the last moment. Despite the fact that everyone revealed their trump cards from the very beginning, he decided to do it only now. Blue-haired understands that with the state of his body, he can no longer fight a protracted battle. Since the calm white cloud and the spiritual tenhiki of cloning need accumulation, the outcome of the battle can be decided by one movement. Meanwhile, Wen Chong has already begun to summon his clones. They begin to appear behind him, and he, being serious, is going to attack the main character right now and end him once and for all. The judge watching this understands that everything will end in a mortal battle. If they are not allowed to fight, the outcome will be unclear. And if they continue to fight, then one of them may die. He is trying to come up with something. He understands that they need to be allowed to fight each other. He also wants the main character to use his 9th rank Zanpakuto, because the judge can only save him if the guy survives the opponent's first attack. Next, we can see from the outside what is going on here. The spectators in the stands are screaming and supporting their favorites, and Wen Chong, meanwhile, managed to summon 5 of his clones, and they are already going to fight. Experts from the crowd are watching the main character and don't understand why he took out a wooden sword. They think that Shu Xiao has no chance against Wen Chong's daggers. They think that he will definitely lose. After his cloning, a serious-minded Wen Chong rushes along with his clones at one poor Shu Xiao. You can see how all the clones are armed, and there are a lot of them. The blue-haired one is about to do something. In the next chapter, we see how Yu Xiaoshu, despite the fact that he could now get hit by Wen Chong, he simply continues to stand in place with his eyes closed. Apparently, this Sigma has a plan. The audience paid attention to the actions of Shu Xiao. They are very unhappy, because they do not understand why he decided to close his eyes in front of the impending threat, because after this, he will no longer be able to open them. The judge begins to run towards the guy, apparently trying to help him. He considers Shu Xiao a complete idiot, because he was already seriously injured, so he should have abandoned the fight rather than fight such a strong opponent. Blue-haired still continues to stand in place, pushing his wooden Minecraft sword out in front of him. Something strange begins to happen. Apparently, he is going to start using his power. Viewers watching this are already beginning to think that it is the wooden sword of Shu Xiao who is rejoicing more here, and not the daggers of Wen Chong. They look at the strange things that happen to the wooden sword, and I just can't understand what is happening. Suddenly, all the spectators in the stands begin to feel an unusual feeling in the area of their hands. Looking at them, they are surprised to discover that these are wooden swords, similar to the one that the main character is holding. The judge, of course, also received one of these swords in his hand. He cannot understand how this is possible. He did not expect to see this from Shu Xiao, and understands that he was blind and underestimated his strength. Wen Chong sees this strange picture and understands that this is the acquired intention of the sword. He does not believe that Shu Xiao is capable of doing such a thing. From surprise, he begins to worry about the fact that he might lose. Next, the main character, thinking that he is playing Beat Saber, begins to chop down his opponent's doubles one after another with light movements of his powerful wooden sword. and you can see how he dominates Wen Chong. After all this, blue-haired makes a long jump forward, continuing to swing his sword. It is clear that he is now very angry and determined to win, and is trying to get to the original right now, killing all the clones. You can see how he cut the remaining clones in half and apparently has already gotten closer to his opponent. It seems that now he will defeat him and show everyone who is the strongest here. The guy with the daggers had already begun to be very afraid for his life and was completely frozen in horror. He did not understand how this could be. Because Shu Xiao had been tempering his body, he did not think that the blue-haired man could have such a terrifying swordsmanship. Liu Jin, watching this performance, understands that if he had not interrupted Shu Xiao's attack with the Dark Sorrow technique, when he took his hidden bitterness, he would have been minced. He now understands that the guy was hiding his powers all this time. Meanwhile, the blue-haired one has come very close to Wen Chong, and being in a jump, he flies straight at his opponent and is already about to put him on the ground, and the yellow-haired one no longer knows what to do. Then you can see how he, a hopeless yellow-haired guy with daggers, uses the spiritual barrier ability. A barrier is formed around him, into which a wooden sword is stuck. He hopes that the barrier can save him. The main character turned his attention to this barrier, but he understands that this barrier will not be able to protect Wen Chong for long. So the blue-haired one is already one step away from victory and is clearly determined to be very serious. Not even a second ago, this magical barrier was easily broken through by the wooden sword of Shu Xiao. The sword is already right at Wen Chong's throat, and he begins to fear for his life and simply looks at the main character. Shu Xiao, pointing the sword at his throat, makes it clear that he is stronger than this fool, and looking straight into his eyes instills fear, and also demands that he surrender, otherwise he will end his life with this sword. Wen Chong had already completely begun to fear for his life. It is already clear how from this one sword and after one word of the main character, the 7th in the ranking of the Driven Clouds was defeated and was not really able to do anything. After this, Shu Xiao removed the sword from his opponent's throat. After he lost, Wen Chong, frozen with fear, stands and looks at the main character, who at that moment for some reason began to shake. It turned out that Shu Xiao was shaking. Due to the fact that he had exhausted all his energy after swinging the sword, he was going to resist the fatigue and try not to fall, because there was a large crowd watching him. We see the face of the yellow-haired man, who is simply furious that Shu Xiao just managed to defeat him. He was confident in his victory, and did not expect to see such a level of strength from him. The audience begins to anger him more, discussing how this guy was defeated. Even though Shu Xiao dared to pester Di Shinner with a wooden sword, they consider Wen Chong helpless. Apparently, the yellow-haired man turned out to be a person who is highly dependent on the opinions of the crowd, so he decides to take out his dagger and stab Shu Xiao in the back, intending to take revenge on him for everything. The judge warns the unsuspecting protagonist that the yellow-haired one is going to stab him with a knife. He tries to stop him by running up to him and saying that the competition is already over and that he shouldn't do this. The system warns the blue-haired man that for a hidden attack in his direction, he receives +1 passivity point. And then he already understands everything and is going to turn around to protect himself and repel the attack. However, the main character turned a little late and had already been stabbed directly in the chest, but the wound was not too deep, but still managed to shock and slightly frighten Shu Xiao. Of course, Wen Chong did everything wrong, so being in shock, the main character on reflex hits him in response using a point and hit him in the same chest, breaking through it and making a wide hole. The guy was even more frightened because of this, apparently. Despite the fact that Wen Chun had just wanted to stab him in the back, the guy did not want to do something cruel in response and thereby finish him off. The judge who ran to his aid realized that the guy would no longer need help. He was shocked by this scene, because the main character was able to pierce the chest of this strong man with only his bare hand. The audience is still in shock. They thought that the main character could already die from a blow from a dagger, but he reacted in time and dodged. They were also surprised to see a huge hole in Boss Wen's chest. Xiao Kixu, as the main character of the tournament, watched this performance from above, and of course this event could not pass him by. There is a turn after turn, and he is surprised by the strength of Shu Xiao. Meanwhile, the main character's hand is still in this villain's chest. The wound is bleeding red liquid, and Wen Chong is also surprised how this blue-haired man was able to pierce his chest with his bare hand. The main character, realizing what he had just done, realized that this yellow-haired man could die right now, so he, very frightened, began to call someone for help to save this guy's life. Help has not yet arrived, so Shu Xiao decides to try to help him on his own. He does not understand Wen Chong attacked him at all and asks him to eat the Qijin pill so that it will cure him. The blue-haired one put this green pill into the yellow-haired one's mouth, but he did not swallow it and it just fell out of his mouth. It can be seen that his eyes are beginning to empty, and apparently, he is already saying goodbye to life. Finally, the judge approaches them. He holds the lifeless body of Wenchang and pulls out the hand of the shocked Shu Xiao from his chest. And the judge also says that everything is already useless because his opponent has died. These words frightened the main character very much. He simply fell into horror. He doesn't want to kill anyone at all because he is very kind, and when he came to this test, he didn't want to kill anyone, he just wanted to win the battles. In the next chapter, we see how Shu Xiao is perplexed that the master of spirit tempering has such a fragile life. He does not believe that Wenchang could die from being pierced. The judge sees that this is his first murder, so he asks to get used to it. Holding the body in his hands, the judge asks the guy not to worry, because it's not his fault. Even if he was the first to inflict his sudden attack on the guy, the fault is on the judge because he couldn't stop him in time, so let the guy go to rest. The spectators are very shocked. They do not believe that Wenchang is seriously dead. Because this is the first murder in the Outer Two in the last 10 years, they did not expect such a turn of events in this test. Some of the spectators insist on excluding Shu Xiao from the test, while others are on his side and say that even though Wenchang's sneak attack failed, Shu Xiao tried to give him a rare pill. Next, we see the pensive protagonist. Apparently, he remembers his murder at the Tournament of Driven Clouds. He greatly blames himself for this and cannot stop thinking about that incident. He thinks what can be done. The events are transferred to the Goose Lake. From here, there is a beautiful view of the outer courtyard of the Tianxin Spiritual Palace, surrounded by weeping willows. The lake itself is crystal clear, and the water is filled with spiritual energy thanks to the goose raised by the Chao Elder. The blue-haired man still walks around this calm place without any mood at all. He looks into the distance and ponders this terrible moment, which he wants to get out of his head as soon as possible. The main character throws a stone into the lake and understands that the same is true in this world. Life is like a stone. No matter how big it is, it will not be able to cause big waves if it drowns in the Goose Lake. Then, under the cover of darkness, he begins to mysteriously look at his hand with which he pierced Wenchang's chest using the edge. Remembering this moment, he begins to become very angry with himself and understands that it will be difficult to forgive himself. Over time, he stopped regretting what he had done. When he came to this world, he should have been prepared for murder in his past life. Shu Xiao valued the desire to live more than others, and since he did this now, he must bear the consequences. Watching the delightful lake under the cover of darkness, Shu Xiao with a smile on his face suddenly realized that he had unknowingly broken through to the 7th stage of spirit hardening, and from this, of course, he became stronger than before. He again throws the stone directly into the water and exhales with relief, thinking that he has finally killed someone, and accepts this fact calmly because he must bear the consequences and deal with it. It turned out that Shu Xiao stayed at the Goose Lake all night. It's already clear that day has come, and now they will show us what the blue-haired Giga Chad is doing right now in this place. And he still mysteriously stands right next to the railing and mysteriously looks straight into the distance. It is clear that he is still standing without a mood, and he needs to see a psychologist to help with his problems. Suddenly, Elder Chang appears behind him, who with a smile asks him what he is doing. Shu Xiao did not expect to see him here and even shouted slightly in surprise because he did not expect this. The gray-haired grandfather still continues to smile and asks Shu Xiao if he would like to watch the Tournament of Driven Clouds because it is now in full swing, and the guy is sitting here and looking at the lake. The blue-haired one is still trying to see someone familiar in this old man. He looks at him in surprise while he is silent, and it even seems that he remembered him and will now tell the rank about it. Continuing to look at his grandfather, he sees how he silently puts on his signature hat, and it seems that thanks to this hat he will be able to remember him, because when they met in the forest, the gray-haired man was wearing it. It can be seen how this very hat was still able to help the blue-haired man remember this man. He realized that this was an elder, and was very surprised by this, because he did not know what he was doing here, thinking that he was here alone. Elder San says that he feels sorry for the guy. He heard that many geniuses appeared at the tournament. He knows that Shu Xiao killed his opponent, and says that he has hot blood. But everything is fine, because he came not because of Wenchang, but because of... for him. The blue-haired man just can't believe that the old man came here for him, and the satisfied old man, standing with his back to the young guy, says that he knows him very well and is going to tell him about the details. The elders Xiao and Chao told him about 2 geniuses from the outer court, as well as about a sword master who was able to recognize the acquired intention of the sword, but only he liked it more than other people. Blue-haired is trying to say something, but he can't, because he doesn't understand what kind of nonsense this old stump is talking about, because he mentioned 4 people, 2 of which are him. Apparently, he'll have to clarify. San sees that the guy has a natural body and realizes that he was right. He looked for him for several days and even walked around the entire outer courtyard. He didn't expect that he seems to be right here. The gray-haired man thinks that the young guy has taste. Blue-haired listened to this old man's words about the guy's wonderful taste, but the main character did not come here to watch geese, but to reflect on life in peace and solitude. The old man noticed him when he passed here at night. He watched him all night. He also considers him a good fellow with excellent determination. He was bitten by mosquitoes, but he did not even move. In this way, he is somewhat similar to the elder of the rank. Next, we can see that the main character is not delighted that this gray-haired old man was watching him all night, without his knowledge, and he also does not understand how his grandfather went completely unnoticed. Blue-haired remembered that in the middle of the night, he felt a cold sensation on his neck, as if someone was breathing down the back of his neck, which means that it was an old man, an ordinary old man from the Tiansang spiritual court, which means that he is definitely a great cultivator. Finally, the joyful old man realized that he was already talking too much about himself, and it was time to give time to the young man so that he could tell him something after listening to him carefully. The blue-haired man, having listened to the elder, shrugs his shoulders in bewilderment. He does not understand what this old man wants from him, because only recently he asked him to be silent and listen carefully to what he says. Then Shu Xiao says that he has to disappoint San because he is the same young and hot killer he was talking about, and he also has an innate body, and he also told him his name and says that he is going to participate in the tournament. The young guy is about to go to the tournament of Driven by Clouds after saying goodbye to the old men, and he stops him by grabbing his hand, and with a smile on his face asks to wait. Shu Xiao is waiting for someone to tell him something. However, before this, the blue-haired man turns to the elder of the rank and asks to let go of his hand, because last evening he did not even have dinner or take a bath. He speaks as if this would scare the old man. Grandfather, as expected, doesn't care about this. He just wants to clarify whether the guy really has so many talents. The main character was surprised that after his grandfather's question, the window of suspicion from the system did not even pop up. He asks why the grandfather demands evidence. The gray-haired elder San reached into his pocket and took out something from there. He, with a serious look, praises Shu Xiao for his confidence and for the fact that he tells him the honest truth without lying, so he offers to eat this thing. Blue-haired is already starting to get tired of this. He considers this old man sick because he came out of nowhere and started praising him, and after all this, he took out his seed and decided to offer him to eat it. You can see from this satisfied old man how much he wants the blue-haired one to eat this thing. He says that everything is fine, but it will be a little painful. But since he has an innate body, he can endure it. In the next chapter, we can see how Shu Xiao hesitantly took the pill from this strange old man and is about to put it in his mouth and check what will happen to him after that. Elder San is still standing over the guy's soul and demands that he eat it, assuring that it is very useful. The main character, experiencing such pressure from him, is already thinking about taking the pill. Next, the blue-haired man throws this thing directly into his mouth, hoping that the old man did not give him poison or some kind of aphrodisiac in order to have fun with the blue-haired man's lifeless body. Then he swallowed the pill. After taking this strange pill, the elder's face switched from serious to somewhat pleased. Apparently, he had completed his task. Shu Xiao clarified what he should do next, and the grandfather said that there was no need to do anything further. Having made sure that the blue-haired man had taken this pill, Elder San instantly disappeared from the young guy's sight and set off in an unknown direction. The guy didn't even understand anything, because his grandfather disappeared too quickly. The blue-haired man was already sweating from this turn of events. He is still in shock and never ceases to be surprised by the strange events that happen in this no less strange world, and does not hold back his emotions. Next, Shu Xiao begins to feel that he is feeling very bad from this pill. Everything around him has become very strange, and he does not understand what kind of disgusting feeling he is experiencing, and calls someone for help, because he feels bad. Next, events move to the Tournament of Driven Clouds. We know that the news of the murder that Shu Xiao committed quickly spread throughout the outer courtyard, so everyone now knows about it. The spectators are sitting and waiting for the tournament to start as soon as possible. Some of them are dissatisfied with the fact that they missed the first kill in the outer courtyard. The spectators are discussing the moments that happened in the last battle between Shu Xiao and Wen Chong. We see the main judge of the tournament, Xiao Qichu. He takes out his piece of paper, stands on stage, and speaks in front of everyone about the death that happened yesterday at the tournament, thinking that everyone has already heard about it. The spectators are unhappy that the elder did not even mention the name of the deceased, thinking that he did not want to make a fuss. They already think that the Linfa Pavilion is removing Shu Xiao from participating in the competition. About to put the piece of paper with the text back in his pocket, Elder Xiao Qishu tells everyone present that he just wants to remind them all of something so that they all know about it. He says that the Tianzin Spiritual Palace has provided comfortable conditions for the competition and does not want anyone to die. Anyway, then he will have to go out into the world where death is a common occurrence, and maximum effort must be made in every test. But the bearded man also hopes that they will be able to master the measure. This measure is life and death, morality and fundamentals in their hearts. If they cross this line, they will break the ban and be held accountable, even no matter who they are. Xiao Qiqu was not so verbose before, but now everything has changed after all. He is no longer a killer of tens of thousands of people, but a great elder of the Tianzin Spiritual Palace, so this is not befitting of him. Xiao Qiqu is going to get to the point and says that 64 semi-finalists will face off in the decisive battle. A draw will be held, and each group will consist of 2 people. The battle itself will last no more than 15 minutes. A man with a long beard raising his hand up announces to everyone the opening of today's competition. The audience is happy to hear this because they want to watch even more exciting fights. But suddenly they were distracted by the voice of the main character who shouted for them to wait, turning their attention to him. The audience saw the unusual Shu Xiao, who was all sweaty and smoking, just like some kind of steam locomotive. The spectators saw him and consider him sick, because he was lucky that Elder Xiao did not hold him accountable, and he still dared to return. Everyone is already expecting to see another day off from Shu Xiao. I am shown previously unseen places for judges. You can see how several people sit behind these places with an important look and watch what is happening, so that at any moment they can take and evaluate what is happening. Among them sits a judge already familiar to us with a bun on his head. He says that Shu Xiao is the guy he told them about. He asks them to draw their attention to him, because the blue-haired guy is clearly going to do something. This guy is crazy. The judge is even willing to bet a spiritual crystal that even Elder Xiao will not be able to stop him. The other judges do not believe that this guy is anything unusual, and he will definitely not be more brilliant than Su Qianqian. One of the judges tells the others that the worst thing about the main character is his unpredictability. No one will ever be able to predict what this guy is going to do in the next second. Elder Xiao Qiqu paid attention and does not understand why he behaves this way. He makes it clear that if there is nothing important here, then he is personally going to deal with him and show who the daddy is. The guy, feeling that he was really hot, somehow enduring all this burning pain, took off his outer clothing and shows everyone his reddened skin. The young guy asks for help from the chief judge. He doesn't understand what that damn old man fed him. As soon as the seed entered his stomach, he immediately began to burn from the inside and could die. He understands that there are doctors at the tournament of driven clouds. That's why he came here. Already starting to cry, he asked the chief judge to help him because he took a strange substance from a strange old man. Because of this, he now needs to get treatment from the medical staff immediately. And Xiao Qiqu fell into a strong rage when he heard that the guy took the substance. He says that in the competition, there is no one who would not do this before the tournament, so there are no rules that prohibit this. Then he asks the guy to get out of here. Blue-haired is still trying to get help from the chief judge. He says that if everything wasn't bad, he wouldn't even come to them, and he really needs some kind of help at the moment. After listening to the guy, the chief judge is already beginning to realize that Shu Xiao is not playing games at all. And given the way he is all smoking and sweating, you can understand that everything is serious, but he did not understand what exactly was happening. Xiao Qiqu calls the guy over to take him and examine him. To understand what's wrong, the blue-haired guy is glad that they will finally help him and quickly approaches the hand of the bearded, serious man. The chief judge had just touched the muscular chest of the main character when he immediately realized that Shu Xiao was actually a hot guy and even burned his hand on him and it hurt him. The spectators are shocked and do not understand what kind of substance Shu Xiao took. Because he was even able to harm Elder Xiao, they consider this madness and understand that what he said is really true, and it makes them laugh. Elder Xiao Qiqu continues to look at his wounded, burnt hand and tries to guess what it is and what Shu Xiao took that burns just like some kind of furnace, and apparently he will be able to do it. The chief judge, looking at his hand, realized that this is the seed of incinerating fireflies. He understands that it was given by the Elder San and considers him crazy. The bearded man realizes that this substance burns and destroys the body. At the beginning of the next chapter, we can observe Shu Xiao, who is perplexed by what the elder said. He just wants help and is waiting for the chief judge to tell him something else. Elder Xiao Qiqu simply looks at him with his sly look and rubbing his hands says that this is a useful thing, especially as a treasure for him. It will not harm him in any way. The words of this bearded fool slightly irritate the main character. He does not understand why the chief judge behaves this way, because he just said that this seed burns the innate body, and now he says that it is useful. The blue-haired man has already completely lost his temper, and clenching his fist looks at the bearded fool and says that he heard everything. The man, in turn, begins to laugh arrogantly, saying that the guy did not hear him well. Having laughed a lot, the elder pats the guy on the shoulder and, breathing out a sigh of relief, advises the blue-haired guy to go and rest, because the guy needs to endure the pain and go through this whole ordeal from the substance. After that, the guy received a passivity point and began to look in bewilderment at the chief judge, who still holds his hand on his shoulder. The guy doesn't need any words, he needs medical staff because he doesn't want to burn. Shu Xiao is already leaving the stage and about to go down the steps, he thinks, and doesn't understand why the chief judge is so ruthless, as if they don't have enough medical staff. He understands that this seed is capable of burning his innate body, and does not understand who Elder San is. His name seems familiar to him. Perhaps Xiao Qishu is somehow connected with that old man, and is most likely an accomplice in the crime. The guy sat down on the ground and understands that the fiery aura began to penetrate his sea of qi. And it is also unknown why the old man needed his death. He is already trying to guess why he did this, and, in the meantime, is relying on himself. While Shu Xiao was sitting on the ground, he decided to use the black pill. He took it out of his pocket and brought it to his nose, taking a strong breath, and apparently it will affect him now. You can see how he suddenly felt better, and Yao Kashu began to approach him from behind, reminding him that this seed burns the innate body. The blue-haired man remembered that he still needs to participate in the competition and does not know what to do. The guy sat and thought about it. After a couple of moments, he suddenly had an idea. He now considers himself a genius and is going to bring his plan to life, hoping that it will work. The blue-haired one, getting to his feet, thinks that he can get rid of anxiety in the heat of a hot battle. It is clear that he is determined to take this seriously, and for him, this idea seems very feasible. Meanwhile, he notices a fight between two losers at the cloud-driven tournament. A guy in a white robe can be seen freezing his opponent, and the judge declares that Chao Qingteng has won. The guy saw how one guy was spoiled on stage, and when he saw the ice, he suddenly began to smile. He noticed that the guy with the sword swung in his direction, and the ice explosion seemed very convenient to him. We again see a table on which there is the name of the main character. Meanwhile, the main judge announced his next opponent to him, and this is Jang Fu. Now they will have to face each other on stage in a fierce battle. These explanations will remain behind the scenes because we already know the whole story. Meanwhile, we see how the main character begins to run up to Xiao Qishu, trying to contact him on an important matter. Running up to the main judge, the main character points his finger at the table where his name and the name of his opponent are. He says that he will defeat him and they will provide him with prompt medical assistance. However, the chief judge was not pleased with the savagery of this participant. He looks very angry and does not understand who he takes the judge to be. So he runs up to him and immediately starts a conversation. Elder Xiao Qishu already thinks that the younger generation is lost. We again see the events that take place in the judges' places. We see how one judge tells another to pay attention to how Elder Xiao just arrived, and he is already being bothered by Shu Xiao. The elder can no longer tolerate the conversations of the main character and asks him to return to his place. The blue-haired one asks to look at him, because his whole body has become red hot. He is also a participant and has the right to treatment. The bearded man begins to smile suspiciously and says that he doesn't care about this. Meanwhile, he really wants to cure the guy, but he can't say that no matter how cool the staff is, they still won't be able to cure him. He needs to resist. The cunning blue-haired one understands that even though the chief judge doesn't care about him, he could get wounded in battle, so they will still have to treat him. Apparently, the guy is up to something. He realized that this was indeed the case. According to the rules, they would have to restore it to its best condition. The chief judge was infuriated by the cleverness of this guy, and he screams for him to get out of here. It can be seen how, apparently, the blue-haired man is going to bring his brilliant plan to life. He calls Jang Fu, and tries to find out where he is in order to go on stage with him for the fight. Not seeing Jang Fu nearby, Shu Xiao continues to call his name and looks around trying to find him. He calls him to rise up and fight against him right now, while the blue-haired man continues to smoke. We see Jang Fu and a black-haired guy next to him. This guy advises him to admit defeat. Otherwise, everything will be bad because this is Shu Xiao himself, a famous fighter with a high reputation, so there is nothing to be ashamed of. Jang Fu was not pleased to hear such words from his friend, because he is going to win this tournament and is not going to give up and wants to try to give at least some resistance and is going to say something right now. The black-haired man interrupted him and tells him to look at Shu Xiao. He is also pumped up with substances and reminds him how he finished off Wen Cheng. He asks him not to act arrogantly. If he goes up there, they will simply finish him off. The red-haired one reminds that yesterday he defeated a genius and believes that now it will be awkward to admit defeat after meeting him. The black-haired one simply says that there is no need to be ashamed in front of strangers. Jang Fu is too confident in himself and tells his black-haired friend that Shu Xiao cannot even break through his defense, so everything is under control and he will now go fight him. As expected, Jang Fu, being very confident in his abilities, ran towards the main character, and the black-haired man considers his friend just a fool for doing such things. The red-haired one runs up to Shu Xiao, and the blue-haired one realizes that he is tall and muscular, and his fists are the size of a punching bag, so he won't have to hold back in battle. This effect is what he needs. Jang Fu shows respect to his opponent. He greets him and says that he is cultivating the golden body so that his defense is superior. He hopes that Shu Xiao will not refuse him advice. Hearing about the golden body, the blue-haired man tensed slightly. Because this is a protective spiritual technique, he already thinks that he will be beaten, and does not understand why he is improving this technique, because he already has an excellent body composition. As we can know, size does not matter, so the chief judge Xiao, being very pleased, announces to everyone that the competition has begun, and the two will begin their fierce battle right now. In the next chapter, we see how Shu Xiao begins to provoke Jang Fu to launch his attack. The blue-haired one realizes that he needs to force his opponent to act, otherwise his whole plan will fail. But from the expression on the red-haired man's face, you might think that he has everything under control and has a cunning plan. He simply decides to use the golden body technique and stand still while under his protection. The result was a very strange picture. These two stood in strange poses and were waiting for actions from each other. The blue-haired one wanted his opponent to start hitting him. Jang Fu activated his defense, afraid of receiving a powerful blow to himself. The audience felt very funny about this whole situation. They don't understand what these two are doing. They laugh and want these two to start attacking each other. But these fools are also interested in seeing how they stand like that until dark. Despite all these ridicule, they continue to simply stand in their strange poses and do not take any action. The chief judge stands next to them and understands that something needs to be done about this. Elder Xiao is very annoyed. Watching this strange scene, he does not understand what is wrong with them. Because the time for the competition is running out, he decides to remind everyone that the time for the competition is only 15 minutes. Blue-haired sees that Jang Fu is full of determination, and it seems that he has no plans to do anything. Shu Xiao is already thinking that he will have to engage in battle to throw out the heat in his body. Of course he can attack, but he is afraid of harming him. The blue-haired man looks at the chief judge and asks him if he would like to help him with this problem by providing medical assistance. The bearded man just looks at him as if he were a fool and laughs at the guy. The main character is trying to show the elder that he is very serious and pointing his finger at his opponent, saying that if he attacks him, the red-haired man may die, from which Jang Fu tensed slightly. Jang Fu was scared as if he had watched the movie Saw 4. He says that if there are grievances between them, then let them solve them themselves. He doesn't understand why they are trying to involve him in this matter, because it's strange. The bearded man already thinks that the blue-haired guy dares to threaten him, and confident of his victory, the chief judge tells the main character that he attacked, and if he kills the red-haired guy, the elder will lose the argument. Their dialogue scares Jang Fu even more. It is clear that he has already lost all his self-confidence and tells them that he is not any bet. He is actually a living person, and Shu Xiao is already about to attack. The audience is surprised that Elder Xiao is angry. They understand that Shu Xiao is capable of such a thing. They are surprised that he talks to the elder like that. But then they understand that this is normal for him and worry about his opponent. It is clear that the blue-haired man is very confident in his victory and asks the chief judge if he is confident in his bet and is already going to attack his opponent. Elder Xiao will be watching this fight. Shu Xiao begins to charge his mighty fist with some kind of purple energy, from which it seemed to ignite. He swung this fist and pointed it straight at Jang Fu, intending to strike. Further, you can see that the blow has already been dealt, but the red-haired man still continues to stand on his feet. A huge hole has formed in the stone ground, from which smoke emanates, which surrounded the entire scene. Blue-haired is very confident in his abilities. He tells everyone that he recently took a substance, so at the moment no one can cope with him, no matter what opponent he comes across, because he is very strong. The bearded man saw that his blow did not cause any harm to Jang Fu. Looking at the main character with a smug look, he asks if this is all he is capable of and expects further actions from him. The red-haired man also drew attention to the high strength of Shu Xiao and wants to be rescued as soon as possible because he will not be able to continue the fight, and there is a possibility that he may not survive the next attacks. The spectators are stunned by how much destructive power Shu Xiao has, and they see how Jang Fu, who made 3 victories in a row in the breakthrough competition, cannot do anything in front of Shu Xiao. They see how the red-haired man's legs are shaking. Jang Fu continues to stand still and shake very violently while he raised his hands up, showing the main character that he is not dangerous, and asks the blue-haired one to show leniency and not take what he said seriously. The spectators observe Jang Fu's behavior and begin to laugh hard at him, seeing how afraid he is. It seems to me that these spectators themselves should be put against Shu Xiao so that they understand what it is like to fight against him, and when you are on the verge of death. Blue-haired understands that no one is going to treat him here, so he is going to keep his promise and kick this red-haired opponent's ass so that everyone realizes how serious he is. Shu Xiao has already jumped straight onto Jang Fu, and while in flight tells him to enjoy the last moments of his life, it is clear how the red-haired man is afraid and no longer knows what to do. Elder Xiao Qixu is watching this picture, and he himself felt scared for Jang Fu's life. It seemed to him that Shu Xiao was just joking, but now it seems to him that the guy is determined. Meanwhile, the blue-haired one had already managed to deliver a strong blow directly to the chest of his opponent. From the expression on Jang Fu's face, one would think that he was in severe pain right now, but it seemed like he had to survive this blow. Shu Xiao begins to look straight into the eyes of the red-haired man with a very sly grin on his face, thereby showing that he dominates him, and Jang Fu still looks very scared and does not know what to do. The main character noticed how his opponent managed to withstand his 5-point blow and begins to congratulate him on this, and also seems to be dancing in front of him. The red-haired one is preparing for another blow. He thinks it's cool that the enemy's defense can withstand the blow, so now there is no need to save himself. Now people should try to save Jang Fu, because now he is the victim here. Shu Xiao begins to draw a lot of air into his lungs, and now he still charges his fist in the same way as last time. But this time the charge will be even stronger, and the blow will be much more painful than last time. The beaten Jang Fu tells himself that he must continue to hold on. He understands that he will not be disgraced at all if he admits defeat after such a blow, so he should continue to endure and hope that he does not die. From the expression on the protagonist's face, you can understand that he is now simply full of madness. His eyes began to glow, and he utters the phrase, "one strike, one palm," after which, apparently, he is going to deliver a crushing blow. In the next chapter, we see how Jang Fu paid attention to what our main character is going to do right now. He realized that he has nothing more to do here, so he says that he is giving up. However, Shu Xiao is full of anger, because no one takes him seriously, and they don't want to provide medical assistance. He, without paying any attention to the red-haired man's words, has already brought his fist closer to his face. The cruel Xiao has already delivered his powerful blow to the poor guy, and he flew back several tens of meters, and right now we will find out what happened to the red-haired opponent. It can be seen how after such a blow, Jang Fu flew a long distance and, landing on the ground, broke through the stone floor. You can understand that the landing was very hard. All his clothes were burned and he was lying unconscious. While Jang Fu was lying on the ground, he still showed no signs of life and lay unconscious. But suddenly for everyone he began to burn. But even the fire did not wake him up. He is now just burning while lying down. The chief judge of the tournament of Driven Clouds drew attention to the beaten Jang Fu. He understands that now everything is very serious, so he calls for doctors to come and help the poor guy as soon as possible. Professional doctors quickly reacted to the words of Elder Xiao Qixu. They ran up to the wounded guy with first aid kits in their hands and began to treat him remotely, using green rays from their hands. Next we see Shu Xiao, who found this fight very easy. He feels that the burning power in his body has disappeared a little when he delivered his blow. Although it hurts, at least he is breathing. The smug blue-haired man approaches the elder and lets him know that if he had not stopped his hand in time, Jang Fu would have died. Xiao Qixu, in turn, simply looks silently at the main character and does not even know what to say. The audience is also shocked by this whole performance, and especially by the blow itself from Shu Xiao. They seem to be frozen in surprise and are about to comment on these events right now. These armchair experts think that Jang Fu is a joke. Even though he made it to the 64 semi-finalists and lost so easily, some people are already laughing at him, while others support him by saying that Shu Xiao has an innate body. But suddenly these geniuses begin to believe that it's all about the substance that Shu Xiao took. They paid attention to the heated airwaves. They now believe that the main character should be removed from the competition. Then we are again shown our blue-haired Sigma, who walks around the yard after the competition and thinks about something of his own, most likely about how he can get rid of the burning feeling inside himself. Meanwhile, the guy decides to check how many passivity points he currently has on his balance. By opening the system interface, he sees that their number has already reached 42888, and this, of course, surprises him very much. Unfortunately for him, he was checking his balance while he was walking, and since he had fixed his attention on this interface, he did not pay attention to the huge column in front of him and hit his empty head against it. Holding his head, he doesn't understand how his points grew so quickly to such a number, because like yesterday after the competition, they reached 10,000, and in just one morning they increased so sharply. Suddenly the guy receives a notification that he gets 2 passivity points for attacking him. This scares him a little, and he already thinks that someone has decided to attack him. But this is not the case. He realized that this was all the seed of sizzling fireflies after he ate it. His body seemed to be on fire, and apparently the system regards this as an attack every second. His points are increasing little by little. The guy sat down with his back against the wall and thought, there are 60 minutes in 1 hour and 60 seconds in a minute, a total of more than 20,000 seconds, that is, more than 20,000 passivity points. However, sitting up against this wall, Shu Xiao somehow broke this wall with his body and lay down on the ground. He is surprised how this happened. But at the same time, he carried out complex mathematical calculations, so he considers himself a mathematician genius. 2 men noticed how this vandal somehow broke the wall. They are dissatisfied and approach the lying guy and try to find out from him about what happened here. But Shu Xiao is in no hurry to answer their question. He slightly stands up from the ground, asks them to wait and help him count how many seconds in a day. Apparently he himself cannot cope. A man with a hot mustache listened to the young guy and, understanding what he wanted, immediately made a thoughtful look. After thinking a little, he gave him his answer, saying that there are 86,400 seconds in a day. Blue-haired was shocked by such a large number. He understands that this is a huge number of passivity points since he receives them every second. So this GigaChad is now a real rich man. Blue-haired even felt dizzy watching this scene. One of the judges understood that according to the instructions, regardless of his status and requirements, the guy should be ignored. As expected, Shu Xiao was behaving strangely. Next, Shu Xiao decides to distract himself a little. He takes a Qijin pill out of his pocket and, sniffing it, realizes that he may soon run out of them, so he should get more. Having sniffed, he understands that the power of the seed of the sizzling fireflies is extraordinary. He doesn't even suffer anymore. Everything is fine, because he can endure all this for the sake of a large number of passivity points. Next, the muscular guy says that the judge begins to walk away from him and begins to shout after him that if he goes to Elder Xiao, then let them ask him for a few Qijin pills and let him not forget to do this. The judge heard this while leaving, but didn't even turn to look at the guy. He just doesn't understand why the main character is now thinking about pills, despite the fact that right now he is experiencing burning pain in his body. Shu Xiao decides to tell them a secret and asks him to remember, firstly, if Elder Xiao agrees to give the pills, he wants them to tell him that the medical staff refused to give them to him. He is also a participant and should receive them. The judge is simply shocked that this guy has the courage to talk to Xiao Qishu like that, because he is the elder of the Linfa Pavilion, and not a vegetable seller. He cannot understand why the guy has not yet been punished. Secondly, the blue-haired man says that if the elder still does not agree, then let them say that he understands that Xiao Qishu is an accomplice in the crime. And thirdly, he must agree, because disagreement in his opinion is impossible. The black-haired man simply stood still all this time and waited for the guy to finish, after which he told the main character to go there himself, because he himself was afraid to address the main judge in this way. Shu Xiao did not like the words of this black-haired man. He begins to raise his tone at him, because he does not understand where he should come from, because he is a participant, and this judge is an employee and must do his job. They must provide him with assistance before the next fight. Seeing the serious expression on Xiao Xiao's face, the judge has already begun to worry for his life and understands that he has no choice, so he must go right now and fulfill his request, and he is also already thinking about changing jobs. In the next chapter, we see Shu Xiao, who opened the interface of his system, and with a sly grin on his face, decides to upgrade his blade ability to an innate level, realizing that he will become stronger. After leveling up, he realizes that when there is no money, you can never imagine the happiness of wasting it. Only 3 days have passed, and he already has more than 40,000 passivity points, and he has also now gotten rid of the excess. The main character begins to charge his palm and realizes that he should test the power of the tip after pumping it to the innate level. With one wave of his hand, he made a huge gap in the stone floor. Then he felt an unusual feeling at his foot, looking at it, and notices that his feet were torn by his shoes. With surprise, he begins to think that now all parts of his body have become sharp. He realized that every skill leveled up to the innate level changes significantly. Now that the edge is at the innate level, he made sure that every part of his body has become sharp, and this is a real artifact for a killer. With a crazy smile, Shu Xiao realizes that with just one blow of his leg, he can simply cut his opponent in half. Since this is a passive skill, there is no need to cast spells, but then how to defend against him. And then this handsome guy comes up with a brilliant plan. He imagined such a development of events that if the enemy can stop his kick, then will he be able to stop the blow with his hair, no matter how strange it may sound. The guy decides to check how his hair blow will go and takes the crystal in his hands as a punching bag and is going to deliver his powerful blow to this thing, wiping it off the face of the earth. As expected, Shu Xiao threw this very crystal up, and since all its parts now have sharpness, he began to control his hair with a serious look and struck the crystal, simply breaking it in half. After he noticed what he managed to do with this poor crystal, the blue-haired man considers himself a genius. Realizing the fact that he had such a brilliant idea, now he can use his hair in battle, and not just for Instagram photo. Continuing to look at the broken crystal, the guy realizes that the way this passive skill is used, it can actually become active, and this sounds very scary and cool. Next, the main character decides to spend another 10,000 passivity points on keys in the system store in order to try to get another new passive ability. But if it doesn't work out, he will of course buy more. You can see how the young guy bought about 10 keys with which he can start the roulette. He is looking at these keys with admiration right now and is already going to start using them. We can see that this blue-haired Sigma is very serious, he shouted throughout the room, and is ready to start making his first spins, and he also hopes very much for luck. Shu Xiao began to carry out all these spins, after which this loser discovers with horror that he does not get anything this time. The system only constantly thanks him for visiting and nothing more. He does not understand how this can be. Judging by this loser, he is already very disappointed, because earlier during the spins he got at least one new ability, but now he got absolutely nothing, despite the fact that he did as many as 10. Shu Xiao continues to lie on the floor, and at that moment the judge notices him, who runs to him, realizing that this guy is crazy. He cut the floor, and also his hair. The judge realized that the blue-haired guy was having fun, so he can't understand why he fell. A man with a mustache comes up to him and, lifting him from the floor, tries to bring him to his senses. He remembers how the chief judge said that Shu Xiao was poisoned. It was the first time he saw someone cutting anything with his hair. The blue-haired one looks very sad even now. He turns his attention to the dark-haired judge and asks him to leave here, because he doesn't want to see anyone and asks to leave him alone. The judge didn't even say anything. It can be seen how the judge listened to Shu Xiao, and like a real adequate person who respects someone else's personal space, he left him alone in this room, and he himself was already heading towards the exit of this building. The crying main character explains his sadness by saying that he spent 10,000 passivity points to nothing because he didn't get anything. There are still 30,000 left. He is already thinking about upgrading his old skills, but then he decides to try his luck again. This time the blue-haired guy is determined. He believes that this time he will definitely not lose, because he is the real embodiment of luck, so he has already managed to purchase a dozen more of these same keys. Our blue-haired man is very proud. He can't afford to be left with nothing, so right now this brave man is going to do a couple more spins in the hope that he will get something. He started doing spins and finally got an ability called Life Cycle. He is very happy. Even though he spent 20 keys to get one passive skill, he can still level up in the future. It turned out that the black-haired judge never had time to leave this building, so he managed to notice how the main character was joyfully spinning around the column. The man thought he was crazy and smiled. The mustachioed judge is surprised how happy a person can be. Alone with himself, does he really not have time to keep up with the times with modern youth, and is apparently very dissatisfied with this. Meanwhile, Shu Xiao has been spinning around this column for so long that he has worn out a small part of it. He resembles a beaver trying to knock down a huge tree to build a dam. The guy decides to look at the system interface and realizes that this ability is in the section of basic passive skills. These are skills that are not as functional as advanced ones, but have a high auxiliary nature. The seed of the sizzling fireflies has energy the size of a fingernail, but the energy itself is so terrifying that it cannot even be measured quantitatively. Blood, veins, bones, all the cells contained in them are subject to the burning force. The blood and flesh of the victim are burned to a charred state, and the meridians are baked to the point of destruction. This, of course, is all very bad, and can lead to very sad consequences. Thanks to the breathing technique, the guy only needs to inhale the Qijin pill to instantly recover. But now this pill has been depleted, and the muscles and bones in the body have been destroyed. but are now recovering on their own. And of course, the smart Shu Xiao realizes that this is the effect of the life cycle. Thanks to this new passive ability, the blue-haired one will be able to withstand the murderous power of this seed inside him. In the next chapter, the main character looks at the interface of the Chinese chat GPT and understands that the role of the new passive skill is to heal wounds. Such help is simply incommensurate for him. The guy looking at his balance realizes that he still has 20,000 passivity points left, which can be exchanged for 5,000 skill points to upgrade his new ability. The main character has upgraded this skill to the 6th level and immediately begins to feel an unexpected pleasant feeling throughout his body. Thus, he began to recover from the damage that the seed from the old man caused him. Blue-haired realized that in less than a minute he was able to recover from all his wounds. He believes that the skill is simply divine, and this cannot but please him. He looks very happy. Next, Shu Xiao's curiosity took over. He decides to see what will happen if he pumps up this ability even more, using 5 more skill points to pump it up as quickly as possible. As a result, he upgraded this ability to an innate level. The rate of destruction of the seed of incinerating fireflies aligned with the life cycle. Fighting with each other, they split in half. The new ability has an absolutely frightening recovery speed. It took the seed half a day to consume 2 Qijin pills, of which there were only 10. And now, he doesn't even need to take these pills anymore. Then the guy becomes interested. Right now, he is going to check something else. Taking a sharp katana in his hands and standing in front of one man, it seems that he wants to injure his raised hand. Expectations were justified. The main character, without much hesitation, simply cut his palm, leaving a deep wound there from which red liquid begins to flow in large quantities. The man watching his actions is in shock and does not understand what the guy is doing, because recently he lost consciousness for no reason, and now he is hurting himself. He believes that Shu Xiao has definitely gone nuts. The main character does not particularly pay attention to the reactions of the people around him. After he wounded his palm with a katana, he put the weapon aside and began to simply look at his hand, waiting for it to recover. His palm recovered very quickly and became just like new. Shu Xiao understands that with the life cycle at the innate level, recovery is faster than with Qijin pills. Meanwhile, the judge whom he sent for healing pills approached him. The mustachioed man was surprised that Elder Xiao gave him as many as 10 bottles for free. It all looks like a dream. The main character is even a little surprised that his request was listened to, and the pills as well as 10 bottles, he is very happy about this. Although now he no longer needs them, because he has an excellent ability. Blue-haired tells the judge with the bottles that this is actually very cool. This is the most important event in his life to come and talk to the elder of the Linfa Pavilion like this, and there was nothing wrong with that. The young guy noticed how the black-haired judge joyfully looked at him and wanted to please him even more, saying that all these bottles would go to him. The judge did not understand what the catch was. He began to refuse such a gift, apparently because he was embarrassed to take it, or because he initially took them for the wounded guy and it would be wrong if he kept them for himself. But the main character is trying to convey to this guy that everything is under control, and he can take them for himself without any problems, because in the future, anything can happen, and they can help him. Seeing the obstinacy of the black-haired judge, Shu Xiao with a dissatisfied look clarifies whether he really doesn't want to take them for himself, because they are very valuable. Then from this man's nod, he realized that he really doesn't want to. Then the blue-haired man begins to call to him the guy who has been watching them from the side all this time and wants to give these bottles to him. The yellow-haired one does not understand what is happening, and the man with the bottles seems to not like something. Next, the main character draws his attention to the fact that these two guys are simply silent and look at him, as if they don't want to take these bottles for themselves, because they are afraid of something. But the blue-haired one is going to tell them something. He tries to calm them down and says that it's just him and them. No one will know at all that they separated them. He didn't even plan to make fun of them to ruin the mood. They listen to Shu Xiao. Then he tells them that each person will get 2 bottles and this is not negotiable, so let them take them and keep them satisfied. As a result, you can see that Shu Xiao's words inspired confidence in the 2 men. They divided these bottles, 2 pieces each, and with a satisfied expression on their faces, they decided to keep them. After a couple of moments, the main referee of the tournament begins to call Shu Xiao from afar to come up to the arena. The main character paid attention to this man and understands that he will now have to fight. He begins to walk into the arena. Meanwhile, the judges behind him look after him and discuss him. They would never have thought that he was such a person, because he did such a good deed towards the 2 of them. They continue to discuss him while he is almost in the arena. They consider him generous, handsome, and a person who thinks outside the box, although he sometimes goes crazy. But it is cute in his own way. Next, the events are transferred to the platform of emerging clouds. Namely, to the main arena, you can see how Shu Xiao met face-to-face with his next opponent. From the table, you can find out that the green-haired man's name is Zhou Tianqian. The two opponents stand point-blank at each other and begin to look into each other's eyes. Each of them tries to instill fear in their opponent. The green-haired one looks very confident in himself, unlike the last opponent, Shu Xiao. Next, Zhou Tianqian decides to step back a little and begin to smile, about to say something to the main character. Behind him is a video of a huge sword, which, as one can understand, is his main weapon. The green-haired man takes out his sword, which is literally the size of his height, and says that the acquired intention of the sword and the innate physique of Shu Xiao make him recognize the strength of the protagonist. Blue-haired begins to smile slyly, thinking that his opponent is trying to intimidate him with his huge sword, but the main character is always confident in his abilities and knows that he can defeat this fool. Suddenly, Zhou Tianqian shows everyone his true intentions. He raises and points his huge and heavy sword towards Shu Xiao and says that his goal is to take first place in the ranking, so he will blow away from his sword. In the next chapter, we see how one of the spectators from the stands, watching as Zhou Tianqian raised his sword at the main character, suddenly realizes that he has acquired blade intent. The rest of the spectators later also realize this and do not understand when he managed to master this skill. Judging by his equanimity, they think that Shu Xiao is in danger, because with such an intention, the blade can make someone with an innate body nervous. This news also reached the chief judge of the tournament and surprised him very much. He understands that Zhou Tianqian had been hiding his abilities all this time and had not shown all his strength to show it now. Even Shu Xiao himself is shocked by this. He does not understand how this can be. He himself only owns the first style of calm white cloud, which depletes the spiritual power of the sword. He believes that he cannot cope with such an opponent. However, according to the main character, the loser can no longer lose. From his sly grin, one can understand that despite the fact that everyone around him has already doubted his victory, he is still ready to defeat this opponent. Crossing his arms, Shu Xiao looks with a satisfied face directly at his opponent Zhou. He advises him not to wag his tongue like that, because after a while he will still lose. We see a healthy guy who just loves Shu Xiao. He communicates with another guy. They understand that the blue-haired one is the only one of the old men who remained in the outer courtyard, and everyone else has already gone into the inner courtyard. The muscular, handsome man does not understand what is causing the explosive effect. It feels like someone has possessed the main character. The guy with the band-aid says that Shu Xiao is as strong as Momo, Chao Qingtang, and others, and begins to laugh at Zhou Tianqian. Next, we are again shown the green-haired man, who, judging by the expression on his face, is very serious about winning, and continues to stand with his sword extended forward and wait for the competition to begin. It turned out that this wait was not long at all. Elder Xiao Qishu had already managed to announce to everyone that the competition was beginning, and everyone present was already going to watch this legendary battle. However, Zhou Tianqian has other plans for this. He still holds his sword at the ready, but when he heard the announcement of the start of the competition, he changed his mind about fighting and asked everyone around to wait. The main fate is not satisfied with the green-haired man's request. He does not understand what is wrong with these participants, and already thinks that this is all the bad influence of Shu Xiao, but still considers each of them somehow strange. The spectators also did not understand what was happening. They only wondered if what Zhou Tianqian wanted was not a fight. Then what exactly? They continued to calmly sit in their seats and expect further actions from him. It turned out that the green-haired man wanted to say something. He began to talk about the attack on the sly from Wen Chong. In his opinion, it was a shameful act, but Shu Xiao could not kill him, but simply punish him. Next, he decides to raise his longsword back directly towards the blue-haired man. He looks very unhappy with his action, and calls the main character a vile and unscrupulous villain. But Shu Xiao was not at all confused, and was able to give him an adequate answer. He believes that this is a strange act on the part of his opponent, namely to expose him as a killer right before their fight. Judging by the expression on Zhou Tianqian's face, he looks very confused and as if he is trying to justify himself to the main character. In his opinion, he was not talking about the murder. He just wanted to clarify everything. Shu Xiao asks if he was in the arena that time, and if he saw everything well. In his opinion, he doesn't know anything, and just came and started talking nonsense, throwing mud at him. What would have happened to the blue-haired one if he said that he did it on purpose? The green-haired man finally removed his sword from the main character. He looks very confused and seems to be very worried. This can be understood by the way he is sweating a lot. He is trying to justify himself and says that this is all not true. Blue-haired continues to blame this fool and demands that he stop making excuses because he knows that his next phrase will be, "You're just clinging to words. So let him stop arguing already." Zhou Tianqian still continues to make excuses and says that he didn't want this at all. The main character points his finger at him and says that people like him always blame others without thinking about the consequences. It can be seen how the pressure from Shu Xiao exerts negative pressure on this green-haired man. His legs begin to shake, and this almost makes him fall to the ground, and he doesn't even know what to say. The main character just looks at Zhou Tianqian and sees how he almost fell to the ground and is trying to somehow hold on leaning on his big sword. Judging by the blue-haired man's face, he is going to do something. The sweaty green-haired man continues to stand in place, while he is silent and continues to sweat heavily, holding the hilt of his sword. Then he turns his attention to Shu Xiao and looks straight at him. The main character, watching this whole pitiful picture, finishes off Zhou Tianqian and tells him that he does not speak when he should speak and speaks when he should not. If he cannot say it, then he begins to act. Zhou Tianqian, who only recently seemed to be a formidable opponent for Shu Xiao, who could rebuff him, is right now standing leaning on his sword and cannot find words for an adequate answer. Shu Xiao understands that Zhou Tianqian is the type of person who thinks with his muscles. Because of the bursting sense of justice, he is very hot-tempered and sees only the superficial picture, or this poor guy was misled. The audience is not happy that Zhou Tianqian was wrong. They blame him for everything. Another part of the audience is still more for him and tells him to go and attack Shu Xiao so as not to be fooled. The main character, meanwhile, continues to look at the green-haired one with the sword, and it already seems to him that he looks very indecisive and ready to admit defeat. The blue-haired one does not want this, and is going to convince him. He turns away from him and turns to him, saying that he probably looks at everything superficially, but as a worthy master of tempering the spirit, as soon as he enters the arena, he should under no circumstances admit defeat. Shu Xiao again explains that if he does not engage in battle, then shame will be imposed on him. If he runs away without a fight, he will be humiliated as a master of tempering the spirit. And in general, if he gives up, everything will be bad for him. Zhou Tianqian listened to this guy and apparently understood that he needed to fight, so he, determined, turns to the main character and says that he will accept his instructions so that there will be a battle soon. Shu Xiao at that moment turned back towards this guy with a big sword and listened to him, realizing that he was able to convince him and was very happy about this event, and now it was time for him to prepare. The chief judge, of course, also listened and saw this whole strange scene. He is shocked right now that Shu Xiao constantly makes the same speech and constantly manages to convince his opponents. In the next chapter, we see how the two began a fierce fight. The swords of Shu Xiao and Zhou Tianqian crossed, after which the green-haired one throws the main character back with one swing, surprising him. Zhou Tianqian himself is surprised that he was able to give some kind of rebuff to the main character, because he thought that he would lose immediately. He looks at him and considers this a wonderful event, intending to continue. For the first time, Shu Xiao's innate body does not please Shu Xiao with its strength, and even his efforts were in vain. If he and his short sword somehow collide with his long sword, the blue-haired man's face would be stained with blood. Fighting with his innate edge, the blue-haired one can cut an opponent in half, so he wants to use sword techniques to hone his acquired swordsmanship. Next we see, while the main character was thinking about his further plan of action, the green-haired one had already raised his sword and was running straight towards him, about to deliver his strong blow. The blue-haired one was going to fight back. However, he decides not to just fight back, but to use some cool technique against this case. He temporarily closed his eyes and begins to prepare to use it, charging with some energy. The main character came to his senses at the last moment and managed to catch his opponent's blade in time, after which he pushed him away with his sword and tried to launch a counterattack, but Zhou Tianqian dodged. The green-haired guy, who had already managed to relax after such an easy start to the battle for him, managed to recover from this counterattack, and having already raised a huge sword was about to attack, because it was his turn. But our main character is not an ordinary guy. He was able to repel this attack with his sword. Their weapons again crossed each other, and at the sight of the impact, a flash of light appeared, which illuminated everything around. While they are crossing their swords, they are not going to do anything yet. They just stand holding their swords and begin to slyly look into each other's eyes while the light illuminates their faces. It can be seen how the blue-haired one is tired of standing in this strange stance with Zhou Tianqian. Then he decides to perform a special technique to temporarily get rid of him. The green-haired one tries to hold on. From the stands of the spectators, one can see how Shu Xiao can still throw his strong opponent several meters back. Zhou Tianqian realized that he could not resist and was going to do something else. The audience, meanwhile, is shocked by this fight. They are interested in watching the battle of the acquired intention of the blade against the acquired intention of the sword. They find this battle exciting and want to see what will happen next. Two very tough rivals stand opposite each other and are waiting for the next moves from each other. It seems that the next move will be right behind Zhou Tianqian, and the blue-haired one is preparing for it. It turned out that this is so. The green-haired one is right now warning Shu Xiao that he is going to use his Blade of Nine Tides. Apparently this is some kind of very strong ability. Nine Tides is a continuous blade technique, one wave higher than the other, becoming stronger, and it is unknown who is able to come into contact with the acquired intent of the blade. The blue-haired man turns his attention to the tricks that Zhou Tianqian is doing. He noticed how huge waves appear behind him, which right now will head straight towards him. He is already preparing to face it. Taking a deep breath, Shu Xiao simply put forward a block in the form of his sword. From his face you can tell that he is very calm. This Giga Chad is always confident in his abilities and can cope with any difficulties at any time. Meanwhile, his opponent did not delay this for long, and having collected a sufficient number of waves behind him, he sent them straight towards the main character, hoping that he could defeat him in this way. A bunch of spectators are watching this performance. They all hold their breath, cross their fingers, and silently watch what will happen to Shu Xiao and whether he will even be able to survive such an attack. And of course, there is nowhere without the chief judge. Xiao Qishu is still watching the whole fight from above, as usual, and from the expression on his face, one can say that nothing surprises this man anymore. He seems sure that nothing will happen to the main character. You can see how these waves have almost reached Shu Xiao. Zhou Tianqian is already beginning to move forward, and the blue-haired one continues to stand in place and tries to withstand this attack, protecting himself. Then a huge bang occurs. The wave has almost reached Shu Xiao, and the green-haired one stands at a safe distance from him. The blue-haired one understands that now he will have to go through all this. The spectators are still surprised and excited watching this epic battle, but one of them began to shout loudly that this was all very cool, disturbing the others. But another spectator refused to shut up. Meanwhile, this wave has already overtaken the main character. From his appearance, you can understand that he is not very happy about this event, and right now is having difficulty withstanding this attack. And the system notifies that he has received passivity points for being attacked. It can be seen that he is starting to get cuts. Zhou Tianqian's mastery of blade intention is unmatched. He can inflict serious lessons even with a slight cut, and the wounds from these tides are more difficult for ordinary people to heal. Next, we can notice how the entire body of the main character is covered with his blood. From his face, we can say that he is not in the best condition now, and it seems that everything is over. But it was not so. Shu Xiao begins to smile, realizing that his new healing ability of the life cycle has been revealed in time, and this skill is very worthy for the main passive skill, because the blood is restored at an amazing speed. Zhou Tianqian already thinks that he is starting to win. He laughs at Shu Xiao and thinks that he is going to give up, because in his opinion he cannot withstand the power of the Blade of Nine Tides. He is going to defeat him. The green-haired one decides to send another wave at the blue-haired one, but this time a larger one. But it's probably already clear that our strong protagonist will be able to withstand everything without any problems. The spectators are rooting for Shu Xiao. He advises him to stand up and not let himself be knocked out of the arena. They also see that he is covered in blood and say that they love him. It's already painful for someone to look at this because they feel scared for him. Shu Xiao's body was covered in blood, but it was all an illusion. He tried his best to pay a lesser price to be able to survive from the blade. The injuries on his body were hardly fatal and affected his actions. The life cycle helps him a lot. The main character is right now going to invest 2 skill points to upgrade his sword skills. He has upgraded his acquired sword skills to the 3rd level and is about to act. We see some kind of blue energy emanating from Shu Xiao. Holding his sword in front of him, he decisively attacks the green-haired man, and at that moment he watches this and begins to fear that he might lose. While his opponent seemed to freeze and continued to look straight at him, the blue-haired man took advantage of the moment and ran very close to him, delivering such a blow that Zhou Tianqian flew far away. The audience understands that Shu Xiao has just broken through. His second sword strike is very similar to the White Cloud's second sword style, that is Cirrus Cloud's, they argue about it. Shu Xiao made a breakthrough in this sword under the beginning of Dishinner, but he never practiced the second style, so in a hurry he changed his swordsmanship. He entered the path of the calm White Cloud, but the technique is not a White Cloud sword technique. The chief judge himself is surprised. Shu Xiao was able to change his fencing technique right in battle. Even in the sword sect, they do not dare to do something like this. He does not believe that this is possible and believes that this is because of his unique qualities. The main character after all this began to look more confident than usual. He put out his sword and stood in a formidable stance in front of his opponent. He turns to Zhou Tianqian and tells him not to stop. From the expression on the face of this green-haired weakling, one can understand that he already strongly doubted his victory. But he listened to the main character and said that this is exactly what he was going to do, getting to his feet. Next, Zhou Tianqian remembers that the only attack that had any effect on Shu Xiao was his tidal attack. He again raised his sword and began to summon huge waves. We are shown the blue-haired opponent from a closer angle. We see how he continues to charge his sword, about to carry out a powerful attack in order to surely finish off the blue-haired one. And looking at his face, it becomes clear that he is very serious. The main character is slightly tense because of the actions of his opponent. He now thinks that this is the only technique that Zhou Tianqian will use, and supposedly he no longer has any trump cards. The whole problem is that the main character cannot yet cope with this technique, given his current level of fencing, but this Sigma still puts his sword forward as a block and prepares to take the blow. At this moment, the guy decides to use 3 more skill points to upgrade his sword skills, so he upgraded his sword skills to the 6th level and is now completely ready for battle. Next, the blue-haired man decides to perform a strange action. He simply closed his eyes and raised his sword high above his head while he breathes deeply, despite the fact that the opponent is about to attack. Zhou Tianqian turned his attention to the actions of Shu Xiao and looking at him. This green-eyed man has questions, and he does not know what to expect from him in the future, and this could be dangerous. The audience also considers these actions strange. Some are already beginning to think that the main character can use the Shu Xiao technique. They assume that he stole the spiritual ability from his opponent right on stage. After all these strange actions, the main character suddenly uses a new ability, namely the calm white cloud of the second version, and Zhou Tianqian did not stand aside and also used an ability called Mountain Turning Immortal. It can be seen how the green-haired man simply raised his sword above his head again, and the sword in turn began to glow with a blue flame, which made it look twice as large. The owner of the sword runs about to strike. However, Shu Xiao is not at all frightened by his opponent's actions. He just stands still with a calm face and puts his sword forward. Thereby, of course, he is going to take the blow. The audience is shocked by the actions of Shu Xiao because it seems like Zhou Tianqian has loaded his sword right now and is about to strike a brutal blow to him. But this does not scare him at all, and now anything can happen. Even the judge himself seems to have begun to worry about this guy. In his opinion, he hesitated for too long, and this is all just to discover his sword. The bearded man now believes that the blue-haired one will lose. Meanwhile, while the audience was watching all the events and discussing this, Zhou Tianqian had already managed to get very close to Shu Xiao and struck his blow, as if a blue energy ring appeared in front of the blue-haired man, which he was going to repel. Well, as usual, the main character never ceases to amaze everyone with his skills and superior strength. He managed to repel this seemingly crushing blow without any problems, and he didn't even show any emotions. Next, Shu Xiao, after a successful defense, decides to go on the attack to show that he is not going to endure this any longer. So with a crazy smile on his face, he hits Zhou Tianqian with his sword, causing him to fly back. In the next chapter, Shu Xiao cannot understand what kind of demonic technique his opponent is using. Because he managed to turn around his innate ability of an immortal moving a mountain, the blue-haired one only has to show one more blade. The green-haired man, having flown some distance across this arena, stopped and stood up, after which, with the help of his large sword, he launched another wave of energy at Shu Xiao, and this time he ran straight at her. In the next frame, we can understand that Shu Xiao collided with the energy wave of his opponent. It is still unknown what happened to him, so we can only hope for the best in this case. It turned out that the main character remained safe and sound. He calmly survived this attack and came out of it. But of course, Zhou Tianqian did not expect this and is going to comment on it. The green-haired man believes that such an immortal with a sword is comparable to his grandfather, who set him on the path of the blade. He wonders if it is possible to use the sword in a similar way, just like a blade. Meanwhile, Shu Xiao looks at this strange guy and sees how he simply closed his eyes. The blue-haired man is perplexed and believes that he completely forgot that he is in battle right now. The main character sees that the green-haired man still does not open his eyes and, being dissatisfied, he exhales and seems to be trying to attract attention, touching his forehead with his sharp sword. You can see how blood is flowing from this wound, and Shu Xiao pays attention to how the green-haired man continues to ignore him. He already believes that his opponent does not respect him in this battle. Next, the green-haired man decides to show everyone that he is not one of those who endure. A strong explosion occurred around him, from which Shu Xiao flew to the side. Zhou Tianqian himself looked very angry. The spectators from the stands, holding their breath, continue to excitedly follow all the events taking place. They see how some kind of blue sphere has formed around Zhou Tianqian. Shu Xiao lies on the ground. The green-haired man's eyes are full of madness. Blood continues to flow from his wound, but he is not going to give up. He screams at the top of his voice and looks straight at the main character and is going to try to kick his ass. From this scream, it was as if a strong dust storm had risen in the arena. The spectators continued to watch this whole nightmare, and also noticed how Zhou Tianqian began to glow a little brighter. Shu Xiao continued to lie on the ground. Several seconds have already passed, and the blue-haired man continues to lie straight on the ground and watch him. At first, he does not understand what is happening, but later he assumes that his opponent has broken through to the innate level. It can be seen how Zhou Tianqian has already calmed down, and they are looking at each other. Shu Xiao doesn't know what to expect from him now, because even at the 10th acquired level, this guy was too strong. But what will happen at the innate level? However, we can notice that the green-haired man is not even going to fight yet. He only thanks the main character for his leniency, because he behaved stupidly. Having received a blow from the sword, he finally realized that Shu Xiao is actually a noble man. Elder Xiao apparently expected to see some kind of harshness further, but seeing how openly the green-haired man began to talk to the main character, he realized that he should not expect anything bad further. The two fought for too long, and the competition time was limited to 15 minutes, so the chief judge announced to everyone that the competition was over and Shu Xiao had won. The participants paid attention to this. At first glance, the green-eyed man seemed embarrassed. Before the start of the fight, he talked about the cruelty of his opponent, but as a result, he took life back into his hands from the supposedly tough Shu Xiao. Zhou Tianqian just thought about something for a while, then he decisively declared to the main character that he had decided to become his friend. This turn of events surprised the blue-haired strongman a little. Zhou Tianqian, during the breakthrough to innateness, destroyed the barrier. The information panel became filled with information, but Shu Xiao did not care. At this moment, he only wanted to quickly return and figure out his swordsmanship. Meanwhile, the spectators sitting in the stands were very excited about the fight between these two strongmen. In their opinion, it was the most exciting fight in a long time, so they began to applaud the two. Shu Xiao gets passivity points for this. Xiao Qiqu looks after the guy. He believes that the blue-haired man has completely abandoned spiritual abilities and forgot about fencing using his creativity. In fact, this is the strongest state of development that the 8th immortal swordsman mentioned. Meanwhile, he continues to look at the main character, and to his surprise he realizes that he is the rise of the shadow of the strongest swordsman, so Shu Xiao is not so simple. Next, the chief judge drew attention to how the audience still couldn't stop applauding. He turned in their direction and with his hands showed everyone to stop, because he wanted to tell everyone something. With a serious look, the elder announces to everyone that the competition is over, and thanks everyone present for visiting. And now it's time for them to leave, because this master is scheduled to begin muning soon. Meanwhile, the events are again transferred to the Goose Lake. We can notice a building already familiar to us, crystal clear water, in which 2 geese are swimming and a bunch of weeping willows that grow around this lake. Shu Xiao is again in his thoughts. He remembered how in the battle with Dixiner, her sword seemed to be full of weak points, and he believed that she was weak in fencing. He does not understand how he was able to know the Tao of the blade. Zhou Tianqian is the only one who influenced his creative thinking. Simply using creativity in combat seems more reasonable than spiritual abilities. Even the White Cloud sword technique has one style. What kind of qualification does one have to talk about its strength and weaknesses? Then the main character no longer cared. If you have a sublime understanding of the path of the sword, perhaps you should continue moving in the same direction. But obviously Shu Xiao does not have such an opportunity. Shu Xiao continues to feel the burning inside him and understands that this thing had to be completely purified. Otherwise, even with the life cycle, the body will be fine for a while, so the cultivation will be destroyed. The guy spent some of his passivity points in the battle with Zhou Tianqian, and he shouldn't have had much left, but when he saw more pure on the balance sheet and realized that it was because of the burning inside, it's cool, but there is a great danger that the heat will reach the sea of qi. Blue-haired clenched his fist, remembering that damn old man who gave him this seed. Shu Xiao is going to refine this thing all night. He is very serious, so nothing will stop him. In the next chapter, we see how Shu Xiao, under the cover of darkness, holds a yellow pill and looks at it. He is going to invest 5 skill points in the breathing technique and has pumped it up to the 6th level. He didn't feel any changes after pumping. Perhaps pumping doesn't even affect this ability. The breathing technique scares him. He didn't intend to pump. But if he starts cultivating the old man's seed, the Chijin pills won't cope and everything will end badly. After which the guy sat down on the ground in his position and began to think about something. Meanwhile, he again felt a strong burning sensation inside himself, but this time it seemed to be stronger than usual. Suddenly we see a very terrible picture. The blue-haired man, feeling this burning sensation, begins to writhe slightly in pain. Meanwhile, blood begins to flow from his eyes, mouth, and nose. Apparently, everything is very bad. Ordinary spiritual power seems to have a fire attribute. He has mastered the attribute power at an acquired level that is usually grasped by innate masters. If he can refine, he may be able to defeat innate masters. Perhaps the San gave this pill with good intentions, and his strength can increase rapidly, but the speed of improvement is too slow. Cultivating the threads will not be able to extinguish the flames without an extra crescent. The main character thought about how he could increase this very speed. Perhaps he would be able to improve it by upgrading his breathing technique. It sounds very cool, and apparently the guy came up with a brilliant idea. And then it dawned on him. He realized how brilliant his idea was related to the breathing technique. He understands that this skill is not easy, and he will definitely be able to do something with its help. This skill does not at all relate to mental abilities, because it is the main one. Perhaps it has other applications. The name breathing technique reminds the guy of the word breathing, and this is something important. Before this, during cultivation and healing of wounds, he used inhalation and exhalation not once, since it is possible to inhale energy. Is it possible to release the energy of the seed that is inside him by exhaling? Sitting on the ground, he understands that the heart should not interfere with actions. Shu Xiao is serious and is going to test his theory in practice, so he took a deep breath and is now completely ready. Suddenly after this seed of incinerating fireflies begins to burn, sparing no energy, right inside this blue-haired man, and it is not clear what will happen to him now, but it will soon be clear. The guy can see that even more blood began to come out of his mouth, and this scared him a little. He understands that he can't tolerate this anymore, so he will have to go through this test and endure all the pain. Meanwhile, we are shown an elder of the Sana, who mysteriously sits on a branch of a large tree also under the cover of darkness, and looks into the distance. Apparently he is right in the same place as the main character. Next, Elder San draws attention to the main character, who decided to try to get rid of his pain. The gray-haired old man is very surprised by this incident, and he thinks that the boy is now dying. We are shown the blue-haired one, who sits and tries to cope with this damn pill. He continues to smoke and feel very strong and excruciating pain, but this does not stop him. Further, apparently this seed inside him is already going crazy, increasing its burning energy. From this, Shu Xiao's blood vessels begin to burst, which makes the pain inside him even stronger. But he is not going to give up. It seems that now everything has become a little calmer. The guy continues to sit in his position and feel the pain. But while it has subsided a little, he is calm as a boa constrictor, and nothing will stop this Sigma. Suddenly, from this whole process, the geese on Goose Lake, which only recently had been swimming quietly and not bothering anyone, began to flap their wings and scream, as if trying to get away from this place. Next, the guy sniffed the smell of a yellow pill, which should definitely help him. He had already gone halfway and only had to endure a little more, enduring this hellish, burning pain. After the guy snorted this pill, he began listening to lectures on making money from Andrew Tate in his micro earphones so as not to get bored, after which some energy waves began to emanate from him. Because of these very waves, the objects around the guy, located on this Goose Lake, suddenly began to break into pieces. Apparently these waves are too powerful and dangerous, but the guy continues to endure everything. Next, we can notice how even powerful tree trunks cannot withstand the powerful shockwave emanating from the main character and simply break in half like some kind of toothpicks. Apparently everything is serious. The animals also begin to go crazy. The swans continue to rush around in different directions. Apparently this process is very stressful for them, and the fish, which only recently swam in the lake, right now floated to the surface, being dead. Suddenly, we are again shown the elder of the Sang, who right now has gone to the source of all these shockwaves to check what is going on there. Most likely, he understands that Shu Xiao is sitting there. However, the old stump could not fly for a long time, yet old age apparently made itself felt, or these same shockwaves were able to overtake him, and he, having lost control, fell into this lake. Now only his foot is visible. We again see the main character, who has finished his meditation. To his surprise, he discovers that he remained alive. This process did not finish him off, and this, as he thinks, is a real miracle, because the chance of death was high. It turned out that his life cycle ability, together with the ability of the breathing technique, fully exhibited the terrifying recovery from the Qijin pill, and apparently, this was actually able to save him. Shu Xiao is in shock because he receives too powerful a restorative power, and one can say that he is already invulnerable because his wounds are restored so quickly that he does not even have time to notice them. The blue-haired man believes that the pain is like pain. Just like from inhaling the first cigarette, he will not procrastinate and will end this as soon as possible. Let's begin to improve this high power of semen immediately directly. The determined protagonist took out another Qijin pill from his pocket and began to inhale its smell using the ability of the breathing technique, and was already ready for the second round, intending to endure all the pain. Meanwhile, the elder has already surfaced. He considers the guy a monster. Because he should feel pain but still continues to do it, the old man says that only with a strong will the main character has a great future. He must definitely cope. In the next chapter, we see how the events still continue to take place on Goose Lake. Under the cover of darkness, 3 law enforcement officers from Pali and Linfa arrived here, who apparently turned their attention to the noise. However, unexpectedly for them, Elder San himself flew up in front of them and asked them to get out of here as soon as possible. They turned their attention to him and were very surprised for some reason. They saw this old man and were convinced that it was Elder San. One of these guys in a red uniform wondered when the deputy head had time to return here, because he had not been seen for a long time. Another guy from these guards thought his colleague's question was not very appropriate and seemed disrespectful to the elder, so he gave him a nice slap in the face and asked him to shut his mouth. After that, all 3 guards knelt before the elder San because they respect him very much and made him understand that they would carry out his order right now and leave here as soon as possible. Next, we see an elder of the rank who looks at these guards a couple of seconds ago, and now their trace has disappeared. The gray-haired man is very glad that everything went so well, and they listened to him. After that, the old man decided to relax a little and take off his cool hat. He was able to protect Shu Xiao from these guards, and now no one will bother him while he is meditating. Goose Lake is destined to be calm this night, but the white jade railings need to be repaired. Given what happened due to the shockwaves emanating from Shu Xiao, not only will the railings have to be restored, but also new trees will have to be planted. A few hours later, it's already noon the next day. The events are again transferred to the Tournament of Driven Clouds. We see a huge arena with spectators in the stands who are patiently waiting to watch another exciting fight. They discuss the events that happened last night and think that someone was doing repairs in the palace. The second says that his yard is located next to the Goose Lake, and someone was practicing martial arts there. Another viewer says that he did not hear anything at all. The guy in the red uniform says that he remembered how he had a soundproof formation installed and that he can't do anything about the fact that he has money. The guy in the dark uniform considers him a freak and is jealous. We see Shu Xiao again. After his night of cultivation, the flames of the sizzling fireflies completely disappeared, and he was able to break through to the peak of the 7th stage. This breakthrough is useful, but not at all necessary in his opinion. The main character is very tired after the events that happened over the past 2 days. He hasn't even slept these days and can't get used to it. And since he's very sleepy now, he decides to lie down and take a nap to regain his strength. Unfortunately for the main character, while he was sleeping and enjoying a wonderful sleep, a black-haired judge approached him, who displeasedly hit him in the face and woke up the guy, because now it was his turn to compete. From this previously sleeping handsome man, one can understand that such impudent behavior on the part of the judge slightly frightened him, for which the system even notified him with 1 passivity point about the reason for his fright. The dissatisfied Shu Xiao changes his position from lying to sitting and seems slightly sad. He is dissatisfied that the black-haired man came and just hit him, although he could have just tried to wake him up calmly. The black-haired one didn't care about the guy's words and didn't even bother to make excuses. He just does his job and says that the competition has begun and it's time for the blue-haired one to go to them. Shu Xiao understands that he won't be able to sleep in the near future. The guy entered the arena. He is going to climb the steps straight to the chief judge. Meanwhile, the crowd from the stands is shouting his name and more for him, calling him a real champion and really want to watch his next fight. As usual, Shu Xiao began to receive passivity points for the inspiration and praise from the crowd. His passivity points are rapidly growing, and he, being pleased with this, begins to wave to all his loyal fans. Elder Xiao continues to stand on the stage and watch how he communicates with the audience, waving his hand at them, despite the fact that he now has to fight. But at one point he got tired of it, so he shouted at the guy to hurry up. We are introduced to his next rival. This is a gray-haired woman in very beautiful clothes, and her name is Li Jing, and she is at the 10th stage of tempering the spirit. so this opponent is not weak and she must give the guy a rebuff. The blue-haired man, standing in front of his strong rival, is about to voice his favorite lecture about the fact that it is very shameful for a warrior to give up and so on, because he wants to fight with her to get passivity points. But he was interrupted. The woman pretended that she didn't even want to hear this, but still continued the phrase after the main character, that if she doesn't join the fight, then it's not good, she shouldn't run, but needs to fight. But she doesn't understand what lies behind this. Li Chenjing got very close to the guy and leaned towards him, which made him feel awkward. She says that she watched him at the competition and thinks he is very cool, and she also decides to ask him for an autograph. Shu Xiao even received 1 passivity point for admiration on her part. It was unexpected that among his rivals there was a fan of his. He did not expect this, but still agrees to give this woman his autograph. The dangerous woman heard the guy's words and was very happy about what he was going to do. She seemed like an adult, serious woman, but she still started giggling like a baby, and even felt a little embarrassed about it. But these two are already standing in front of each other, and apparently are serious about winning. The chief judge approaches them, and raising his hand above himself, announces to everyone that the competition has begun, so it's time for them to fight. The main character, like a real gentleman, allows the beautiful lady to make her move first and even extended his hand forward, and is already waiting for some action from Li Chenjing, being satisfied. However, apparently this gray-haired woman's plans did not include a fight with this Giga-Chad. He only announced that he was giving up, even though Shu Xiao allowed her to make her move first, and he just stood there. These words greatly disappointed Shu Xiao, especially since she first stole his line, and now decides to give up. He doesn't understand what kind of fan she is, since she doesn't allow him to earn passivity points. She explains her actions by saying that Jang Fu is still lying unconscious in the medicine pavilion and cannot take part in the rating battle, which is why she does not want to fight him, because she does not want to get injured, but wants to get into the rating battle. While drinking his glass of water, Elder Xiao Qishu announced to everyone that the competition was over, and the victory went to Shu Xiao. He looked dissatisfied, apparently because he himself wanted to watch this interesting battle. The spectators are also unhappy with this news, because they didn't even move. One expert from the crowd thinks that Li Chenjing did the right thing, because she is at stage 10, and Shu Xiao is at stage 7. And another viewer, realizing that he was talking complete nonsense, asked him shut up. After the gray-haired girl gave up and did not even dare to try herself in battle, she immediately began to hand the guy a brush so that he would give her an autograph, and he was very dissatisfied, but he would still do it as he promised. Shu Xiao sharply exhaled his entire breath into the air and considers this fan to be simply abnormal. Looking at her, he took the brush from her and, turning to her, asked where he should sign. Li Chenjing asks Shu Xiao to sign right on her palm and has already held it out expecting an autograph from this celebrity. Apparently, she didn't have any paper left with her, so the main character will have to sign right there. In the next chapter, we see how Li Chenjin notices a disgruntled fan dressed in blue clothes in the stands. She shouts something at her, and the gray-haired girl tries to understand what they are saying to her. It turned out that this black-haired fan was simply furious when she saw how this woman treated Shu Xiao. She demanded that Li Chenjing get away from him, because only she would get the main character. An embarrassed gray-haired woman just sticks her tongue out at this girl and teases her by making strange sounds. She says that since the girl in blue clothes did not train well, then let her sit silently and be jealous. And then you can see how Shu Xiao is annoyed by the argument between these two girls. He just quickly signs the hands of his fan, who was supposed to fight with him now. You can see from her how happy she is, and considers this a victory. Having started to sign Li Chenjing on her palm, he asks her not to give in to anyone she meets next. Otherwise, it won't be very good and she will be considered just a coward for the rest of her life. Finally, the guy signed her palm. The woman begins to look at this inscription with pleasure and, after listening to the main character, promises that she will not give in to anyone again. No one knows whether to believe her or not. Having had enough of the autograph from her idol, the woman begins to giggle embarrassedly, after which she thanks the guy, and he, as you can see, is still not happy that she gave up. After receiving the autograph, Li Chenjing begins to run away from the blue-haired man like a little girl, and even forgot to pick up her brush, which Shu Xiao gave so that he could give an autograph. He shouts after her so that she takes this thing. The girl heard the guy's screams. She stopped, and without even turning to look at him, she said that she was giving this thing to him. Apparently, she was too lazy to take it back, so the guy will have to walk around with this brush, and he is unhappy about it. The bearded chief judge, as usual, begins to scratch his long beard and has already looked away. Apparently, he thought that it was a romantic gift from a woman and pretended that he did not do it. Even Shu Xiao himself froze at this, realizing that this could really happen. Could Chen Jing really be in love with this blue-haired strongman? Apparently, he doesn't like it at all. Next, the crazy fan from the stands, apparently forgetting that Senjing is at the 10th stage, decides to unexpectedly attack her and send her flying with her kick, because from today on, she is her sworn enemy. But the gray-haired girl didn't even fight back with her. She just showed off to this crazy girl the autograph on her palm from Shu Xiao. She felt sad and envious, already thinking about cutting off this hand and taking it for herself. Next, the events are transferred to the waiting area, where the main character is sitting and holding something in his hands, thinking about something. He is still walking around without a mood after that incident at the competition. He is already in the quarterfinals, and today he will have another fight, and then there will be a battle for the championship. He does not yet know whether he will be able to take the champion title, because Zhou Tianqian's combat power is at its peak, and how much stronger he will become at the innate level. Innate is actually a common term. It contains 3 kingdoms: the Garden of Life, Homelessness, and Elevation of Spirit. After the 10th stage, the Tempering Master comprehends the heavenly path and opens the Garden of Life. If successful, the power of the innate attribute can awaken. The strength of the innate attribute is very mysterious and varies from person to person. In total, there are 5 elements also consisting of perception. These include the Frost Sword of Chao Qing Teng and the innate cutting blade of Zhou Tianqian. Although Shu Xiaoshu's passive skills can be used as innate, there are still limitations. Without the strength of the innate attribute, he has stronger defensive abilities than the rest of the members. The guy believes that even if the others try their best to get the champion's place, it seems unrealistic for them, since Shu Xiaoshu is very strong and they cannot compare with him. Right now, the guy has 5 passive abilities. 3 are already at the innate level. The guy is going to do more spins right now. Last time he pulled out the life cycle and also received 3 passive and 7 more regular keys and did 10 spins at once. The guy opened the interface of the Chinese ChatGPT, selects the keys there, and is already going to spend a bunch of his twists and knock out a new cool passive ability from there, embodying all his great luck. It turned out that while the guy was sitting all alone and talking to himself, he was noticed by 2 judges who hid and began to watch him, realizing that something was about to happen again. Paying attention to what Shu Xiaoshu is doing now, the yellow-haired one asks to prepare rescue tools right now, and the black-haired one wants to look first, but the other one hurries him, because if something happens, they may not have time to help. It can be seen how the guy just started doing twists and took a very strange position to do it. It was because of this that the judges thought that something bad was going to happen to him and were waiting for it to help. You can see that the guy has already managed to do a whole dozen of these same twists, but he still didn't get anything. The system only thanked him a few times for his visit, and from this again, he was disappointed and simply fell to the ground. This was a signal for the judges watching the blue-haired man. They had already taken a bunch of bottles with healing pills and began to run up to the guy. But when they approached, they discovered how he had woken up and began to ask them what they were doing here. They were surprised and asked if he was okay. Shu Xiaoshu just laughs because what could have happened to him? He understands that because of the broken system, it is becoming increasingly difficult to get something. But fortunately, he prepared in advance, so he was not afraid and did not lose consciousness. Blue-haired notices how these 2 judges, who wanted to help him, remained in this place and just looked at him. Despite the fact that he had already woken up, he asks them to leave here, because everything is already in order and they listen to him. As they left, they began to discuss the blue-haired one. The yellow-haired one says that his body was not overheated, so the gloves were of no use. The black-haired one says that no one knows this. Perhaps they did the right thing by putting them on him. The guy continues to sit in this room all alone and is very sad that he didn't get anything, and he wasted a lot of passivity points. The judges, in turn, continue to watch him quietly and wait for his further actions. Shu Xiaoshu believes that the system is cheating. He just threw away 10,000 passivity points like a stone in the sea. That is, they just disappeared. He even feels funny about this whole situation, because it even sounds stupid. Dissatisfied, he remembers that when he first used the roulette, one of the 3 keys gave him a tip, and then he said, "Come again." But what now? Shu Xiaoshu cannot understand. Further, it is clear that Shu Xiaoshu is very determined. He made an exchange for 8 more keys and began to start his twists. He hopes that at least this time he will get something. A serious guy, after purchasing a bunch of new keys, is determined to knock out at least something, having spent a large number of passivity points, so he begins his spins, embodying all his luck.